So Louise Van Rhyn, well, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Now, I mean, you do lots of things. I certainly know you as a part of what Symphonia, the holding company that oversees Partners for Possibility. But perhaps let's start with that. What is it you do, and what is it that you have done?
So, Ashraf, my background is organizational and leadership development. And I returned to South Africa about 20 years ago with a yearning to make a contribution and to do something more than just, earn money. And so it took a while for me to get a really strong sense about where I could contribute my background, knowledge, skills. And I realized that it was in education specifically, and specifically around organizational and leadership development in the education system. So 10 years ago, we developed a program called Partners for Possibility, where we've made it possible for business leaders to partner with school principals, and then together they strengthen the leadership capacity in the school. And that program has been running now for, as I said, 10 years. We've reached about 1,350 schools now. And we've impacted the lives of about 1 million people.
Yeah, I mean that's, and when you started that, I mean, and beyond that, because we want to talk more about what you've done there. Were there any other strictly non-profit projects which is like business ventures you were involved in?
So I've always kept. We have two companies. So Symphonia for South Africa is the not-for-profit. Symphonia Leadership Development is the for-profit organization. For the last 10 years, I've really been focusing all my attention on Symphonia for South Africa, the not-for-profit. I've just handed over responsibility for that to a new program director, and so now I'm thinking about what the future might hold, and how I'm specifically curious to think about how can we use what we've learned about cross-sector collaboration, this idea of a 70-20-10 leadership development program, which is what Partners for Possibility is about. How could we use the lessons that we've learned there in other areas, in business? I mean, how do we set young people up for success, young new leaders who are on a leadership development process, part of a leadership development process? How do we take this to other sectors, health, agriculture, so many other areas where we need help and where we need to strengthen leadership capacity. And so that's my interest at the moment is how can we capitalize on the lessons we've learned over the last 10 years and the impact we've had and take that into other areas.
Okay, well, that makes complete sense to me. I mean, where I come from as wanting to deliver champion South Africa is this vision of a champion nation. So it does mean how do you impact elsewhere. So let's then let's rewind to tell us more about Partners for Possibility and these partnerships. So what have you actually done, and to what degree has it impacted positively on education in South Africa?
Yeah. So so how it works is we partner a business leader and a school principal on a leadership development program. And then the action learning component of their leadership development program is to make change happen in the school. And we're working specifically on the 4 key enablers for successful change, which is a confident and energized school principal, an aligned and cohesive school management team, energized teachers, and a community that's engaged at the school. So those are our key enablers that the business leader and principal then work on together. And what happens in each of those schools, Ashraf, is often, I find, it feels miraculous. So we have these 2 leaders who are coming together, they're given a context to work in, and then they address the issues and mobilize community, and they just find the most creative solutions for the issues that they face because of the kind of content that we provide. So there's a structure. The program is done in leadership circles around the country, and we're now working in all 9 provinces. We have between 8 and 10 partnerships in every circle. That circle is facilitated locally by a learning process facilitator. They attend training together. They have community of practice sessions. So it's very, very carefully designed to give the structure for these two people to use their ingenuity and creativity and really step up as leaders. So it's not a leader follower program. It's a leader to leader program. We are working with 1,300 school leaders and 1,300 business leaders. And these people have chosen to show up as active citizens and to create a champion South Africa. And it starts with one. So our theory of change is that the unit of change in education is the school and the school community. And so we are going to fix education not by what happens at the kind of national level, but rather what happens in every school. So every school individually have to go through a change process to become a healthy organization and deliver good outcomes. And so that's the theory. Now, and my point is that is as applicable to other areas as it is, every hospital, every clinic, every farm, every local government office. They all have people who've been put in roles where they don't necessarily have, well, we know in education, our principals are very rarely have they been prepared for that task to be a principal. So now they are, they get training and they get very, hands-on support to improve their schools.
And what impact has that made? I mean, so I understand that you've got the business leader who's skilled in a certain space, willing to give his or her time to a school that they didn't know before, and you have the school willing to invite them over, and they have this partnership as you talk about. So in the 10-year period, what has happened? I mean, how are you able to measure that this partnership, bringing two skilled people together to then skills transfer and vice versa, has actually worked in improving the standard of education in that particular school?
So that answer, that question is not simple to answer. However, there is an answer to it. So in South Africa, the only province that has systemic tests where we can actually see whether the results are changing year on year is the Western Cape. So in the Western Cape, we're able to show that in most of the schools that have been part of Partners Possibility, there has been an improvement in academic outcomes. But that's not the only thing that matters. So what we're interested in is the conversations that we have with people from the education department. And they would say, in that school, that principal has started to take leadership in the most amazing way. The teachers are more engaged. The parents are more engaged. There's more of a sense of vision and purpose and cohesion and a sense of possibility in that school. There's new energy. We talk to principals who say, before Partners Possibility, I was about to leave the profession. And then I got a new lease on life. And now I feel empowered and I know what to do. I understand my role better. My team is more engaged. So there's a very real danger that people want to look at, what is the impact on the education outcomes. But in a situation where you can't measure that, you have to look at other indicators. And the other indicator for us is the extent to which the principal is stepping up and leading and feeling empowered and feeling energized and mobilizing the community, and whether the parents are engaged and whether the children are excited about what's going on at the school, and whether the teachers come to school every day because they have a vision and they have something to pursue. So it's very strongly guided by our understanding about healthy organizations. Healthy organizations deliver better outcomes, and we are all around creating healthy organizations and strengthening the leadership capacity and the organizational capacity of these individual schools. You have to remember, Ashraf, most principals in our country were teachers in a classroom. They had 30 or 40 children in a classroom. They knew how to manage those children, but they had no idea how to manage a complex organization with HR and IT and finance and all of that. So that's what we bring is new insight, knowledge, understanding about how to deal with this multifaceted organization with all these different stakeholders.
And you did say that, it's not just about academia. I understand that it's a whole holistic culture change within that school, which I would then think would be also within the environment around that school, because the parents would be from those areas, right? But having said that, we are going to measure by academic standards. I mean, are those schools performing better?
So this is the problem. Anecdotally, there are many examples, many stories that we hear it from the district officials, we hear it from the principals that the results are improving, but we can't prove it because of the lack of data. So we simply have, so if the results improve based on the tests that the children inside the school have written, those indicators are there, but they're not seen as valid indicators for success because they're not systemic. We can't measure them over time. They're not externally validated. Yeah, so it's a very difficult challenge. We wish we had, used to have the ANA results. And when we had the ANAs, then we could say, hey, this school is improving and year on year there's an improvement, and we could all celebrate that. We don't have the ANAs anymore. So now we have to work on what the teachers are telling us and the principal and the district official, but because as a country we desperately need a measurement system that we can use to measure these kinds.
Yeah, good point. I take it then maybe there are two levels. On the one level, the simple barometer would be, are parents rushing to get their children to attend that school? That is a school that is part of the Partners for Possibility program.
Exactly. And there's one story. And so we've just published our new book, and there's one story in Letsetele. I actually tell the story in the book about a situation that one of the Partners for Possibility schools have become completely overcrowded because all the parents want to bring their children to the school. So when I spoke to the district manager about it, he said, no, it's a man-made problem. I said, what do you mean it's a man-made problem? He said, well, the principal is now so much better in this school that all the other parents want their children in this school. So that is the problem. We do need to then figure out how do we not just have 10 schools in a community, because those 10 schools will become overcrowded because there is so that's a very wonderful, it's a wonderful measurement, and if that's the measurement, then we're having massive impact across the country.
Yeah. I would take it, therefore, that schools that are close to, say the school you just mentioned, say 5 km away, would they sort of feel hard done that they're missing out, and therefore would then after that approach you and say, come on, we want to get on board as well?
We often have that situation. So we only work with principals who want to be part of the program. So we don't force anybody. We don't so people put their hand up, and initially there would be people who kind of be uncomfortable and they're not entirely sure, and they don't say yes the first time, and then they don't get selected. Then the other people around them get chosen to be part of PFP, and then inevitably a few years later or a year later we would get a message to say, please can I also join the program? So we do have a lot of that, and in areas, so our program is dependent on where we can find funding and where we can get business leaders. So in an area like Letsetele, for example, we haven't found another group of funders, so unfortunately we've only been working in 10 schools in that area. But we definitely there's definitely a word of mouth. What happens is the principals hear about the program from other principals who've been part of the program, and then they're desperate to be part of it.
Yeah, understandably so. But you are internationally or globally recognized, right, as Partners for Possibility in terms of the impact you've made. Tell me about those global acknowledgements and why were you recognized such?
So the most significant, we've got, pages full of recognition, and so firstly we were recognized for the innovation. So nobody's ever done this anywhere in the world, and then secondly for the fact that for the impact we've had. So the WISE, the World Innovation Summit in Education, choose six initiatives, education initiatives per year around the world, and you go through quite a rigorous selection process, and they have a whole series of evaluations. So 2 years ago, we were one of the WISE award winners. And many other examples, just because it is such an innovative idea, this idea of bringing business leaders into schools, not as, traditionally we brought business into schools as coaches and mentors. We're not doing that. We're saying that we're bringing business leaders in as co-learners, and they're also on a leadership development program. So they're not coming with their traditional patriarchal, patronizing way into schools. They're coming to learn. And they're learning how to influence without authority, how to make things happen when you don't have any direct control, how to mobilize community in an under-resourced area. So they learn so much. We find these business leaders say, you know what, I've always worked in a corporate in Old Mutual or Nedbank or Sanlam, and now I'm finding out that the world doesn't work like that if in Khayelitsha and Gugulethu. So when I go to Alexandra, I have to use different skills. And people there are not worried. They're not interested to know that I'm the marketing manager, because I can't be bothered about that. So I have to learn how to influence by who I am being rather than what my job title is or what car I drive or how, So it's a completely different set of a skill set that people need to learn. I don't know whether you remember a few years ago, Barack Obama was in South Africa and he did the Nelson Mandela lecture. And he said if we need to get people out of their comfortable corporate office and we need to get them in community so that they can go and find out that stuff that they learned in business school doesn't work in Alexandra. And he's right. And then, one of the things that we've seen has been, for me personally, as a white person in this country, privileged, I've realized that the program has confronted me with my own privilege. And so during this Black Lives Matter conversation, I've been thinking a lot about, how do we create more opportunities for people to just leave their safe bubble, comfortable bubble of whiteness and privilege and cross over into a community that's, has very different, looks very different, has different things to offer, but to rethink the story that they had about that community. So we talk about this, the idea of a single story. So my story about Alexandra is going to be very different before I actually spend time there. So that's been the really beautiful thing, is to see how this program has opened up relationships between people who wouldn't normally spend time together. It's created this sense of cohesiveness, of this opportunity to strengthen the fabric of our nation.
I suppose that the key phrase there is, in this partnership, how do you overcome unconscious bias from both sides, from the business leader who twins with the school principal?
So, and that's the whole. So when you because the people are working together for a whole year, and during this year, they attend workshops, they're being coached, they attend courses, they're in a community of practice session. There's a lot of opportunity for them to get confronted with their own biases. And when that happens, they have a support structure. So they have a trained coach who then work through that with them. And then obviously because we've been doing it for 10 years and more than 3,000 people have done it, we've learned that there are specific areas where people are might struggle with that. And so we've created the training courses to address that. So I think, if we had to do a survey, that people who've been through PFP, white people are much more aware of their own privilege. They're much more aware of their own tendency to judge other people. They're much more conscious of their unconscious privilege, their unconscious sense of superiority. All of those things they're being confronted with it. But that's not the reason they join PFP. That's a secondary result. But actually, I'm wondering whether that might not be a more important result than the original idea.
Yeah, good point. Which brings me to this important question: how do you choose the school principal, and how do you choose the business leader, and how do you then choose that they must be matched up at that school?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question. And again, obviously, we've done lots of research on the different approaches. So firstly, we only work with principals who want to be part of the program. And that's I think that's that's something that we should take into other parts of our lives as well. It's this idea that we can force people to do something, I think, is a very outdated and old idea. So we work instead of mandate, we work on invitation. So principals are invited, and when they enthusiastically say yes, then we work with them. So then they get selected. Then then there's a few other things that they have to have at least 5 years before they're going to be retiring, and a few other things. But the most important thing is it has to be a choice. They have to choose to do the program. The business leaders have to also choose to do it. So it's a slightly harder ask, because we're asking them to invest 150 hours. There's some funding involved, so they either need to get the funding themselves or get their business or pay for themselves. So this is not an easy request. And yet we've got, as I said, 1,350 business leaders have already said yes, because people know how much, firstly, they're yearning to make a difference. So what's the one thing I've learned from this program is that there are thousands of people in South Africa who are yearning to make a difference, but they just don't know how. So we provide a very, very, I don't want to say safe or comfortable, because it's not neither of those, but we create a structured program. It's facilitated. They're going to know that they set up for success. So it's a much better thing than just, knocking on a door of a school and say, I want to come and help. So there are thousands of people who want to make a contribution. Business has an enormous role to play. So the asset-based community development approach, say, you look around you and you look at underutilized resources, and then you find ways to tap into those underutilized resources. Now, you and I both know, if you just look at any of our large organizations, they're full of people who are just amazing and have so much to offer. And so this program enables us to tap into, I call them the South Africa's gold dust. If you hear some of the stories from these business leaders, CEOs of large organizations who've been part of the program, and as a result of being part of the program, their whole thinking about how to lead their own organization has changed, their approach to leadership has changed, their approach to transformation has changed. Next week, on the 13th of August, we've got one of the CEO of Multitech, a guy called Thomas Holtz. When you hear his story and how this program has fundamentally changed who he is as a human being, you can't but get excited about what's possible. If we were to create more actively and more formally create these networks of action between our government and business, for example. I mean, that was what the National Development Plan asked for. It says we need to have cross-sector collaboration. Business, government, civil society need to work together to strengthen our state and to strengthen leadership.
So this is a practical grassroots level collaboration, as opposed to at a macro level, which sometimes we don't quite get, right? Just help me with this. So, I mean, the business leaders that, Brand Pretorius comes to mind, because he's just a wise, incredibly wise human being, and I know he's part of your project. So you're saying you'd identify the school principal, because somebody would have told you about that school, and then you'd get the okay that he's interested. So you'd go to a Brand Pretorius and you'd ask what of him, because you mentioned commitment, funding, obviously some business skills that he brings to the party. Take us through that process. It could be him, it could be others. Like what typically happens when you approach the business person?
Yeah, so Brand Pretorius has not formally personally been involved, but Brand's two sons have both been involved. So let's take Brand's son, Brand, who works at Momentum. So he's head of short-term insurance at Momentum. Brand decided to join the program. We obviously make sure that he understands what he's saying yes to. In that case, Momentum paid for his participation, so he was given a sponsorship by Momentum, and we would just have a very important contracting conversation with Brand to understand. Does he understand that this is going to require him to go the extra mile, go beyond the course of duty, and we have the conversation around rubber balls and crystal balls. So this is not a rubber ball. You don't drop this program. This is a crystal ball, because you have a very important relationship with a leader who potentially can change the trajectory of 1,000 children's lives. So Brand says yes. We then we have a conversation with him around where does he live and how can we find which areas would be good for him just geographically. We give him some options. We said these are the principals on our waiting list, and he make a choice, and then there's all sorts of ways in which this happens. But finally, there's a decision that Brunt will be partnering with this principal from this school, and then the two of them join their leadership circle, and they have a learning process facilitator. I think in that case it was Marichen Mortimer, who was living in Pretoria. Brunt lives in Pretoria, and then the circle start their journey. And we follow the Theory U model that comes from Otto Scharmer that says for the first 3 months of the program, we ask the business leaders and the principals not to go into doing mode, but to spend their time in discovery and building relationships mode. So they do that. They spend time. Brunt goes to the school. At the moment, we're doing the program virtually, so people spend lots of time on Zoom and understand the school and the community and the stakeholders and complexity and what the issues are. I'll never forget Anton Mini, who's one of the senior leaders at Liberty. He tells the story about his first visit to the school, and he arrived at the school thinking he's going to just get a little list that he can take back to his office and he can say to his team, go and sort these things out. And then he arrived at the list, and Agnes, his principal, he asked her what were the things that kept her awake at night. And she said, well, the first one is teenage pregnancy. And the second one is truancy. And the third one is parents. I don't know how to get the parents engaged. And Anton was, oh my goodness, Johan, not Anton, Johan Mini. He was, oh my goodness, that means I'm going to help you to figure this one out. So that's the point. So the business leaders are typically completely overwhelmed by the size of the issue, by the complexity. I'm just thinking of one of the beautiful stories, Kandani Msibi, who you will have seen on Twitter many times. He's very active on Twitter. A while ago, we had a session with him, and he met with some young people from Switzerland who was here on a program. And Kandani said to them, in South Africa, one of the jobs that's really scary to be in is to lead a mining company. He says, in the mining company that's probably the most challenging, this was at the time, is Lonmin. He says, so if anybody came to me and said, Kandani, we'll pay you whatever amount of money, and you can choose one of two jobs. One is you are the CEO of Lonmin, and the other one is you're a principal of an under-resourced school in Diepsloot. Same amount of money. He said, I will choose to be the CEO of Lonmin. And we all go, why on earth would you do that? He said, because if I'm the CEO of Lonmin, at least I will have a team. I'll have people who can work with HR and IT and finance and all that stuff. When I'm the principal of an under-resourced school in Diepsloot, I'm on my own. I have to do finance, HR, IT, all those things, and I don't know how to do that. And the reality is that the principals don't know how to do that either. They're the most resilient and courageous people because they just tackle this even though they have no idea how to do this. So the point is that the business leaders are then completely overwhelmed and they have no idea how to do this. And then we take them by the hand, slowly and surely, and we help them to figure out how to, engage with the community, meet the community where the community is, bring a sense of possibility, and then tap into their resources and start to address one issue after the other. So, in one school, it might be that the finances is completely, all over the show. Yesterday, we had a meeting with one of the business leaders whose principal, the financial situation in that school was just dire. 2 years later, they've paid off all the debt, they've sorted it out, the systems are working, the business leaders now on the SGB, there's a sense that everybody can breathe because the finances have been resolved. In another school, it might be that they want to address the fact that the teachers are not well trained. In another school, they might decide that they want to make reading a priority, or they want to build a library, or ultimately it's towards better outcomes. But mostly in these schools, there's low-hanging fruit. If they can deal with the teenage pregnancy issue in a high school, and actually the upshot of that particular story with Johan Mini is a few years later, the teenage pregnancy went down, I can't remember the figures, but it was a ridiculous amount. So they look at what are the issues that are keeping the community members and the teachers awake at that school, and they deal with that, which is again what excites me about. Can you imagine if we had, in a particular town, we had each member of the local government partnered with a local community member or a local business leader, and then together they were committed to co-create an alternative future. This is not business leaders coming in to tell principals or local government leaders what they should be doing, but it's an opportunity for synergy. So the business leader brings what they bring, the principal bring what they bring, and together they, 1 + 1 becomes 10.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I watched your video clip from Edward Kieswetter, who's the head of the revenue service in South Africa, SARS, right? And he made a point about the value of a good principle, and you've clearly amplified that, which then I think is a good segue into what happens next. So you're saying, in fact, you're not now heading up Partners for Possibility any longer. So what then is the plan to replicate this partnership in other sectors? So what's the vision and what's the plan?
So blank slate. We are, so for 10 years I've been committing my time to Partners for Possibility in education. I have now handed that over last week, so it's not a long time. And I'm still committed to. I have a 6 months handover commitment that I'm committed to do. But part of this is to start to think, how can we use this in other areas? How can we use it in areas that's really burning our country? How can we use this model to create more jobs, which is the area that's keeping me awake at night, or to improve local government? Is a massive issue for us. If we could tap into the knowledge and skills that's available in our country, or ESCOM, or health. There's so many areas where we're sitting with lots of skills. We have, some of our business leaders are retired business leaders. Ashraf, these guys are amazing. They've got 50 years of experience. And now they're sitting at home drinking gin. So they phone me and say, Louise, can I please come and join this program? Because if anybody's going to offer me another gin, I'm going to throw them with the gin. So they play golf. You can only play golf and drink gin and garden so long. And then you want to do something with your life. So imagine if we could tap into, I have a friend who runs 50 plus, the 50 plus network. Imagine if we could tap into the skills of these people who still have 10, 15, 20 productive years, but they've retired from their corporate role. So I don't have any answers. I'm curious. I want to figure this out. I want to work with people. I met with a CEO last year, which I need to pick up that conversation. But he said, he listened to my story. He said, Louise, I'm not all that interested in education, so I kind of, that's a bit harsh. He said, but I'm very interested in using this model to develop my young Black leaders and to figure out a way to tap into the knowledge and skills of these typically white silverbacks who have been holding on to their knowledge, but now we want them to feel a sense of responsibility for the success of these young leaders. So that's another opportunity, is to take this model into corporates and help us to really develop the capacity of our next generation of leaders.
Okay, but you committed to that. I mean, that's what you want to do now. Blank slate, I understand, but that's your plan, right? Yeah. What, we spoke about the global awards earlier on, the global recognition. So to what degree are you, recognized, you as in Partners for Possibility, of course, recognized in South Africa by the presidency, by education specifically, all 9 provinces? Yeah. To what degree are you recognized, valued, and told, like, hold it, this is a model we can replicate, even in education only? Has that happened?
So that's another interesting question. We have often said that we are more recognized internationally than we are in South Africa. We have, a few years ago, received a beautiful letter of endorsement and gratitude and congratulations from the president when we won the WISE Award from his office. In education, partly there's a bit of a challenge because the education department people can often feel that we are judgmental of them, and then I remind them of the National Development Plan that says that education, well, and actually this is not just the National Development Plan, there's an international appreciation that we can no longer abdicate responsibility for our children to the education department. We have to work together. Education will never on their own know how to prepare children for jobs. Business has to get involved in that. So it's to help people see that this is not about criticism and judgment, and this is about citizens standing up saying, I'm available, I have skills, I want to offer it. And we have, that's why our work is mostly done directly with principals, because these are the people on the ground, these are the people who are desperate for assistance. And then over a while, typically the circuit managers in those areas say, oh, this is wonderful. This takes pressure off me. So I don't have to worry about these 10 principals anymore because I've got 10 business leaders working with them. I'm going to worry about these other principals that I have to worry about. So it is an ongoing process. We've got lots of, many letters of endorsements. The question is, on the book launch, you listen to some of the snippets, but just before Edward spoke, there was one of the guys, Wilhelm from Kraus from Knowledge Resources. He said, why don't we just get some of this COVID money and invest it in partners' possibility, and then we know we have a much better chance of success because we've got the cross-sector collaboration. That's going to be, it's not an easy process because, people have set ideas. Personally, I just feel very strongly that business in South Africa is an underutilized resource, and business leaders, individual people who are committed to a champion nation and who want to give their knowledge and skills. And we've seen now from Partners Possibility that if you do that well and you carefully facilitate that process, then miracles can happen. And for me, that's where I get excited about your initiative as well, is around really not getting, because it's easy to get kind of very negative about what's going on in the country. But if we say, how do we bring our gifts and contributions, all of us, with what we have to offer, we bring it together and we figure out ways to work together. You'll remember from the Dinner King scenarios, it was the walk together scenario. That scenario is still a scenario. That is still what we need to aspire to, because we have seen what happens when we walk apart, which was the second scenario, and walk behind. Where our government's now trying to be strong and we have to be followers, we're all being frustrated by that. That's not the future I'm committed to. I'm committed to a future that's described in our Vision 2030. I still believe in that vision as it's described, but it's going to require each of us to bring what we have to offer.
Yeah, but that point, miracles do happen. Miracles can happen. I think it's just so incredibly exciting. I think let's leave it at that, because that's probably the high that we should end on. And I certainly hope that you achieve all that you set out in part 2, part 3, part 4, 5, and 6. Again, around this copy and paste of Partners for Possibility. Certainly from my side, Louise, you're quite right. That is vision of building a champion nation, champion South Africa. And what that means, of course, is if you get it right, what you're doing next, then you are actually helping us achieve our vision. So you want a partner? Happy to chat to you anytime. Thank you so much for your time.
So so I have no intention of doing this on my own. It's about all of us in partnership. So the communities that you've created, and that's where the answers lie, and we need to look for ways to capitalize on that. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity.